Everybody, is it possible to work and listen after such a fabulous meal? It was just wonderful. Thank you all. Thank you so much, Maria Isabel and Edu, for organizing it. I want to start this afternoon, as we discussed earlier, by introducing our moderator. Dr. Manuel Blanco, Manolo to all of us affectionately, is going to introduce the speakers, he's going to guide the conversation, and he's going to help us create a conversation among them, and then we begin the Q&A. Before I introduce Manolo, I have to say something before I forget. One of our wonderful guests, Ramiro, of the Jewelry Museum, would you come up here and just say what you have to say? This is a very sweet thing that, okay, you can make your invitation. Okay.
Sure. Monica and myself will just organize Carta de Fiscal at Museo de Jiménez. I'm going to give you a poster of Fiscales, which is $5 here. It's a beautiful museum with a permanent collection in Rome, and it costs the snacks. So you're welcome to join us at 6 p.m.
Thank you so much, Rami. So we've been invited to a little cocktail party after this. At 6 o'clock, you'll have time to go home and rest. Thank you so much. Dr. Manuel Blanco is a chaired professor, a catedrático at the Polytechnical University in Madrid. He is he's the dean of the Architecture, Design, Fashion, and Society new program, right? That's right, more or less, okay? Okay, he's breaking all kinds of boundaries. He's remapping, recalculating what fashion, what design, how all of these fit together as we begin to think about the world that we're in now. So it's a brand new program within the School of Architecture that's being developed. He was the first director of the Museo Nacional de Arquitectura y Urbanismo, and that was in 2007 and in Madrid. So, the reason he is here, aside from being an incredibly close colleague and friend for almost 30 years, is that he has worked extensively in the Americas. He just is finished an exhibition in Panama. He's worked in Mexico. He is one of the most absolutely original and innovative exhibition designers who I know. He's a thinker who has worked with all of the major architects, Peter Eisenman, Santiago Calatrava, making exhibitions for them. And I could go on and on. One of the exciting things that he's done that maybe some of you have seen, is be in charge of the architectural pavilion in the Venice Biennale in 2006, right? Yes, and did, again, an innovative display of Madrid, La Ciudad Femenina, and it was just wonderful. Nosotros las ciudades. So again, he's a thinker, he's a maker, he's a theoretician, he's a friend, and I think he can help move our conversation forward in a really wonderful way. But before he sits down, I want to tell you that whenever I go to Spain, he teaches me new words. And the phrase that he taught me about 20 years ago was, una faena de aliño. Do you remember that? Which I've learned, or he explained to me, and he lives, is a kind of bullfighting move which has come to mean that when you have an idea and you let it stew and marinate and strategize, you're doing a faena de aliño, is that right? So that's what he's going to help us do, a little bit of faena de aliño as we think about what all of these talks mean, so we weave it into really an interesting idea that can help us recalculate, remap, realign our thinking, which is really what this is all about. Thank you, my friend. It's all good.
Of course, all the applause is for Selma, for Graciela, for Marisabel for having organized this meeting. And thank you very much for inviting me. We were discussing if I was going to say or no that finally it's not here because Spain belongs to this hemisphere. It's because really my family is coming from this hemisphere to the other all the times. From that kind of Spanish diaspora that took my grandparents to Cuba, and my parents coming back to La Habana when I was 5 years old. So as a matter of fact, I belong to the two worlds at the same time. I am changing everything that I am going to say because for me it was very revealing what I was hearing this morning. That concept, that very healthy concept of a museum like a place integrated with the community. What Fundación Arpelu were explaining, the director this morning, and explaining how the museum can be so involved in the community. And it's not the big building, it's not the huge collection, it's what you do with it. The museum as a tool, because museums are a very, very powerful tool. I am not so sure if that tool has been used in the last decades in a correct world, because museums has been used and misused. This session that is linked to what's happened with society and museums and what's it's abroad, I cannot avoid to reflect what has happened with so many museums created as a tool to give life again to a city. In some cases, that happens and happened very well. We all know the Bilbao case with Guggenheim, how by miracle or by Jesuits' influence happened, or how the rural area, industrial area, was given life again through a series of museums and cultural parks linked to it. But that use of museums as tool has also misused it, and we have had too many things that maybe shouldn't have done and that are provoking a part of the crisis in this moment. Reflecting about museums is reflecting about society, reflecting about the crisis of society, all kinds of societies, not only economical crisis, but also violence. We have here one lecturer that is going to explain to us how violence is involved in Mexican society and how museums that are alive, and maybe the Mexican museums are the more alive in the world, that's the reason Selma is here, is reflecting what's happening. So we'll get that coming from UNAM, and I'll explain a little later who she is. Today is a very difficult day. Mwanda has told me something that moved me, not to cry, but almost. In Tunisia, there was an attack, a fundamentalist attack, and I didn't know it was at the Bardo Museum. The Bardo, for the ones who don't know it, is like the Prado Museum, but of Roman mosaic. The most beautiful pieces are there, and it's the most important cultural institution that Tunisia has. 7 people have been killed there. So violence in museums, museums reflecting the violence of society. We are in an economical crisis moment. We are here attending a meeting about philanthropy also, and how the money can help. But money has been a problem for all museums in these last decades. In Spain, I was having a dinner a few days ago with the director of the fashion museum, and she was explaining our major problem in this moment is this last 3-4 years has been very, very tough, but nobody was expecting us to do anything. But now that the Spanish economy is recovering, we don't have money for doing these things, and we are expected to do these things. So that's a main problem. One of the most important failures that the Spanish government in this moment had was the sponsorship law. The sponsorship law was supposed to supply the money that the Spanish government party was not giving to cultural affairs. But that sponsorship law was never implemented. The project of La Salle, the Secretary of State of Culture, was blocked by the Secretary of State for Finance. So we are in a very difficult situation. Up to that point that last week, Félix de Montebello was in Madrid talking about the sponsorship, and in a meeting, we were 50 people, in a meeting organized by the Fundación La Caixa with a foundation called Arte y Mecenazgo, art and sponsorship. Félix de Montebello was talking about the sponsorship and how the private money could be given to museums, and everybody was there. From the Duke of Alba to Plácido Arango to the Botín family, the owners of Banco de Santander. It was in some way a demonstration that that is very important. Montebello, talking about, very well of course, about how he was evolving and getting money from private donors for museums, also put the blame in something he didn't like, and saying it was a shame that important museums like Louvre were being sold, meaning sold the name to Abu Dhabi for 400 million euros. The sold plus 900 millions for what was going to say. It's impossible to talk about museums for me in this moment without talking about museums as the last and more important luxury item that can be bought in this moment. And in a moment, well, as Selma told you, I was appointed almost 2 years ago, the Dean of Fashion Design at the Polytechnical University, and I had to learn what luxury means. Luxury is not only that something is very expensive or very exclusive. Luxury also means that there is a tradition linked to that brand. A luxury brand is a brand that has a lot of important traditions and things linked to the possibility you to buy it. Museums are, for me, the utmost repository of luxury because are the ones who has really the memory, and we are selling that. Louvre is selling that for 400 euros, 400 millions euros. I think museums are reflecting also anything that is happening with us. We are in a very complicated world. Fred has been complaining all the time that I have this in my hand all the time. And because, of course, I am living here, and at the same time, I am answering WhatsApps that are coming from Madrid, and I am checking my mail, and I am doing whatever to know who is around me. Museums are doing that. We are going to have a very interesting lecture in the use and misuse of technology, something I am especially interested. I have been using all the gray areas of technology in all my work, and my work is usually curating and designing exhibits. Selma told you that I had something in Panama. My exhibit in Panama is about the process of creation. And what I am doing is putting a connection, a link, a straight link, and you are seeing through a screen what's doing the creator, the designer in his bureau. So you are going to see what he's doing, and he can see you, and if he likes you, because he's seeing through cameras that are in all the site, he will link with you. That means also something that I was talking with Mercedes yesterday night. Museums act as an experience. I was explaining to her, I could have done that, putting that on TV. I could have done that, putting that on a web. But what I am interested are in projects, on-site specific projects that are done for a place, and museums are giving us a new experience and a new change. In that world where Instagram is the king and we are publishing pictures, I published 2 minutes ago a picture of this space in Instagram, and we are sharing images. Museums are becoming also something very objectualized, meaning are the wallpaper, the photo call, the scenario for the life of a lot of people that are not only going to see what's there, but want to be seen being there. So from Mona Lisa to the last contemporary painting, people are taking pictures of themselves in front of the building. What my father of the painting, what my father says, that pictures of yo aquí, tú aquí, nosotros aquí. And that are the new public of the museums, up to a point that National Gallery, Tate are forbidding the sticks to make that selfies because they could be damage for things. So we have to think what we are going to do with that. Of course, there is a National Museum Selfie Day organized, but I don't remember who, and that is making everybody pictures at the museum at the same time. We are going to have a very interesting lecture. She told me from a very traditional approach in the use and misuse of technology for museums. Museums reflect also everything that is linked to society and the mantras that are important for that. Accessibility up to the point that the new director of the Louvre is spending a very important part of the money he got from Abu Dhabi, making the museum public friendly, meaning helping the people to go inside the museum, having less queues. It's supposed to be that the first day he went like a client and he made a 3-hour queue. That could be worse, so he decided I have to cut that with IMPay, agreeing with that. Museums are also about sustainability. How you can make a project that is sustainable, how the traces, the carbon traces, are going to be less and less. We'll have some very interesting lecture about that, given by Miguel Fernandez Felix. He is, as you very well know, a specialist in how to manage the system of information and the management of a museum, and he's going to show us how it can be done in a new institution revitalized like he did with Museo de Bellas Artes. And museums are also about cooperation, about networking, and about synergy. That synergy can be very important. Sometimes showing how that cooperation is strong, the strengths, and other times showing the weaknesses. Linda is going to explain to us that what's happening, because Lydia was directing the OAS museum. So something that is supposed to be the link of all the states belonging to the OAS in America, and the problems linked to it are going to finish with it. But I cannot finish saying or talking about weakness. I think this meeting is about strengths and the synergy that comes from two very powerful universities, USC and UNAM, working together. I have to confess, about two very powerful women working together, Selma and Graciela. Sorry, Graciela, I don't know so much you that I can make jokes, but I have to say it. But everybody knows here that you are powerful. And Selma, nobody discussed. Only Selma smiles a lot, and she disguises it very well. But all of us are here because we didn't know how to say no to Selma, because the proposal was so attractive that we came. And in that case, it's not only important. Think that universities are the oldest cultural institutions in the world. So museums are being created for universities, supported by universities, and in former times saved, some of them, by universities. So that synergy is very important in this meeting. And the synergy is with another woman and with the institution she belongs. I was talking about mecenazgo, I was talking about sponsorship. Now we have to talk about philanthropy, about the meaning not only of giving money, but giving money with a purpose. So Fundación Harp-Helú, Oaxaca, is a major player in this game, a major player in this country, and this meeting is also about that. I think we are very lucky to attend this place, to attend this meeting, and to see the work of the three women hand in hand, making us to reflect of what's going on. So if you allow me, I would like to introduce someone very special. I have been spending all the day asking who she is, because she was not here. She was attending her work, because of course, Graciela is making her to work a lot. Graciela was complaining that you were not here, because she said this meeting is not only about giving a lecture, it's also about networking, and she was completely right. And she belongs to that category that make a lot of us being here, starting I don't know where, maybe in the School of Architecture or in a ranch. But finally, we are here. She started as a dance teacher, and from the dance, she came to dance with us, being a major expert in education. So learning education are her capabilities. She has been the director of cultural training of Conaculta. Now she is very happy because she says she's working with a very interesting woman, and that makes her to work a lot, meaning Graciela. And she is the technical secretary of the General Directorate of Visual Art of the UNAM. She's going to talk about violence, and I am very interested in what the talk is going to be. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Manuel. Thank you to Selma and Graciela for the invitation. Thanks for Mrs. Maria Isabel too. I dedicate this paper to Graciela de la Torre that allows me to express my ideas freely. This is very important in this country and for me. And I very want to do this more attractive, but my English is so bad, and so I need to read my paper, sorry. The University Museum of Contemporary Art, MUAC, home to the country's first public collection of contemporary art, was opened amidst a social context notable for the poor educational level of the general population, and one where the visual and aesthetic education is not a priority. The case of the MUAC is particularly interesting insofar as it is a university museum, insofar as the subject of this exhibition is contemporary art, considered by many to be elitist, and insofar as it belongs to a society that is driven by violence and inequality. Culture and artistic practices offer an attractive means of raising people's quality of life, and ideally, they help to repair the social fabric. In what sense is this possible in a space as important yet as limited as a museum? What type of experiences should be designed to make contemporary art accessible to a great number of people? From what perspective can museums carry out self-criticism? How to reduce blind spots and see beyond the immediate horizon? To address these and other questions, here I will focus on presenting only 3 issues. 1. The UNAM comprises an extensive system of museums and cultural venues, whose purpose is the preservation, study, and dissemination of their scientific, historical, and artistic collections. In November 2008, the university inaugurated one of its most ambitious projects, the MUAC, and in parallel, set about assembling the first public collection of contemporary art in Mexico, which to date comprises over 19,000 works. According to its mission statement, the MUAC collects, preserves, researches, exhibits, and disseminates contemporary art. It is a space for the production of sensory, emotional, and knowledge-based experience, which offer the public a wide range of possibilities for exploring their individuality. The MUAC builds a collection and archive for the artistic production in Mexico from 1952 to the present. The architectural project was assigned to Teodoro González de León, who together with a team of exhibition design experts led by Graciela de la Torre, developed the program of requirements and the exhibition design concept. In the words of its director, the MUAC is a post-museum, and as such, it focuses on users, on their experiences, and the process of experiencing them, to which end the visitor is conceived as a traveler with the ability to set up their own itinerary and embark on a voyage of discovery. The focus is on the construction of knowledge and meaningful learning, and on the incorporation of multiple voices and perspectives. Without denying the significance of the UNAM in the development of the country, it is important to recognize that, like other higher education institutions, it faces a number of structural problems, such as guarantee quality education, increasing its infrastructure, and dealing with the vast deficiency in coverage. Every increasing number of young people seek to enter the university, and the number of spaces available has not increased, in spite of recent efforts to incorporate modalities such as distance education or opening campuses in other cities. In this regard, it is important to point out that in Mexico, only 2.8% of the total populations enter higher education. A couple of further statistics contextualize the limitations of the institutions are as follows. Out of national population of almost 120 million, and little over 20 million live in the metropolitan zone of the Valley of Mexico, where the UNAM is located. The UNAM has 313,000 students, representing just 0.3% of the total population and 1.7% of the inhabitants of the metropolitan zone. Nevertheless, the UNAM spearheads the dissemination of culture and artistic experimentation. It has proven an important counterbalance to the dictates of cultural policy and museums management by state institutions. However, we should approach it with a critical eye, since the institution confronts numerous challenges both from within and in the context of a country that is submerged in violence of several kinds and with a population marked by extreme inequality. 2. Mexico is a land of contrast in all its extension and in every sphere: cultural, economic, social, geographic, political. As André Breton said in 1938, Mexico keeps open an inexhaustible register of sensations, from the most benign to the most insidious. Mexico is complex, heterogeneous, and diverse. It is a country that is home to organizations and sectors of society that fight tirelessly on behalf of human rights. At the same time, it is dominated by corruption and unequal distribution of wealth and a lack of long-term planning by its institutions. A large sector of the population lacks access to education, health, and housing. We are witness every day to violent acts and attitudes, whether by organized crime or within institutions, society, or families. We bear witness to the transformation in values and behavior that, influenced in part by the media and new technologies, favor the path of easy and immediacy over contemplation, reflection, and making informed decisions. Taken together, these are phenomena that over the years have led to an ever-widening spiral of marginalization, poverty, and ignorance. I cannot fail to mention some of the key examples of the wave of violence that has been unleashed on my country. It manifests itself in the political, social, institutional spheres, in the work, education, and domestic spheres, both within and outside organized crime groups and within vulnerable groups such as women, children, and migrants, and within the workplace and the home. The list is endless, and every day the media and social networks report on the murders, robberies, kidnappings, extortions, bullying, violations of human rights, and domestic violence that are continually occurring all over the country. It is true that certain states report higher numbers of deaths of disappearance, yet the so-called epidemic of violence afflicts the entire country. The consequences of lack of the foresight, indifference, corruption, and violence have reached unprecedented levels in the second decade of the 21st century, and the breakdown of the social fabric has come hot in their heels. We are looking at drawings by children who live in the state of Michoacán, Mexico, representing the Mexico in which they live. I continue. There are 53 million people living in poverty, while the second richest man in the world is Mexican. A culture of jokes and black humor and of music, handicrafts, and television series inspired by organized crime coexist with daily reports of the most atrocious crimes. Intellectuals and scientists have been recognized with the Nobel Prizes for peace, literature, and chemistry, while the average schooling level on the country is 8.6 years. 43% of young people aged between 15 and 19 do not attend school, and 6.9% of the total population is illiterate. Despite the fact that the political constitution of the United Mexican States establishes that all citizens have the right to receive obligatory elementary education and the right to access to culture and enjoyment of its goods, together with the exercise of their cultural rights, the reality of the quality and effectiveness of the national education system is overwhelming. For example, the OECD, of which Mexico is a member, uses the PISA test to evaluate students' knowledge and ability in reading, math, and science. Recently, it declared that it would take Mexico more than 25 years to reach the average for OECD countries in math and more than 65 years in reading. By contrast, the cultural development of Mexico displays astonishing strength and vitality. There is a wide range of quality artistic output in both institutional and emerging spheres, together with a significant cultural infrastructure, including theaters, art schools, cultural centers, museums, concert halls, and cinemas. However, The majority of the population do not possess the basic elements required to enable them to enjoy equal access to the appreciation, criticism, and enjoyment of different artistic manifestations. Such elements should ideally be provided as part of the elementary education. Given this deficiency, the gap in inequality and the distance between art and those who know about art compared to the great majority is increasing. The fact is that the panorama of art education in the official national curriculum for elementary education could not be more discouraging. The teachers who present this subject are poorly trained, and the arts and their study in general are treated as a filler subject. It is self-evident that both those responsible for educational system and school directors, teachers, and parents are all more concerned with children learning math, sciences, and reading than gaining a quality education in the arts. In summary, 94 for every 100 children aged between 6 and 14 years, and only 5 out of every 100 people aged 20 and over are in education. 43% of young people between 15 and 19 years of age do not attend school, and only 2.8% of the total population enters higher education. This implies that the majority of the total population studied is studying or will study at least 8 of the 12 years that comprise elementary education, meaning that, for many, learning and having meaningful experiences in relation to art and museums in school will be the only opportunity they have, and one they will not have in their family or anywhere else. Hence, in order to make a reality of the intentions of the Constitution, the state should make an effort to place greater emphasis on the quality of basic visual and artistic education, and museums should work to design innovative and relevant experiences for this segment of the population. We must focus on the education of the broader public and on generating a positive impact during their visit to the museum, in the hope that this is not the only visit in their lives. I am little, ya casi termino, in Spanish. 3. Contemporary art, what is it? What does it look like? An interminable dissertation could be written of the subject, but for the purposes of this presentation, it suffices to point out that in recent years, a large number of contemporary art museums have been built in many countries and continents. It is a visual manifestation that addresses issues such as its place in the present, the role it plays in the history of art, the reconceptualization of politics, its integration into culture, and the emergence of experimental media in its production. It is also important to take into account the criticism directed at contemporary art, which focuses above all on its elitist, inward-looking character, the lack of rigor in the production of work, its submission to patrons, and the arrogance displayed by the artistic and curatorial sphere that surrounds this form of artistic production. Let us consider these criticisms in the light of the poor visual education of Mexican population, who are at a disadvantage with regard to works of art in general, not to speak of the manifestations of contemporary art in particular. Despite the above, the exhibition shown at the MUAC over the almost 6 years since it opened have been well documented, impeccably designed, and challenging, innovative, and provocative. In its own way, and seeking to incorporate multiple voices and perspectives, it has functioned as a space and platform of visibility for emerging artists and communities. For example, in 2014 was present The South Never Dies by an artist collective from Tlacolula, Oaxaca, whose artistic output is focused on analyzing violence in tourist areas, the transformation of traditions, and the social cynicism that idealizes and reserves the stereotypes of artistic practices in Oaxaca. Then there is the exhibition, The Return of the Lake, by Brazilian artist Maria Teresa Alves, who engaged in an investigation in partnership with the small Jico Bailey Community Museum, located in the state of Mexico, which analyzed the historical conditions, confrontations, and social struggles in relation to the drying out of the Tláhuac Lake in the early 20th century. In this exhibition, we may draw attention to the program of parallel activities, in which the community of the Bailey of Chalco played an active role and which has brought about a fruitful exchange with the MUAC, its audiences, and the Jico Museum itself. Meanwhile, the MUAC's pedagogical program has successfully implemented the project The MUAC in Your Home, which is a creative way of impacting on the visual education of student communities in UNAM, enabling the consecration of artistic objects by transferring them from the museums to private spaces. The project involves loaning works from the museum collection for exhibition in the homes of high school students for 7 weeks, enable young people to come into contact with and gain awareness of different museum processes, and above all, to enjoy contemporary art. The 3 cases I have mentioned have promoted accessibility and the inclusion of a range of audiences, and are mere examples of the many experiences that it is possible to create at the Contemporary Art Museum of the UNAM. Nevertheless, it needs to be asked, are we doing enough? It is inevitable that we raise the need for more and better audience studies. Who are our users and what are they like? How many members of the university community itself have never heard of the MUAC? Is it possible that some people do not come to these and other museums because they feel excluded and at a disadvantage with regard to what is shown and what happens? How to address the tendency revealed in national surveys that those interviewed prefer to relax, go to cinema, watch television, or listen to music rather than visit a museum? Likewise, it is important to ask ourselves for what reasons different audiences do visit museums. Is it because of the building that house them, their advertising campaigns, in order to take part in parallel activities or to enjoy the exhibitions? On the basis of the available data, it would be reasonable to suppose that most of the population have not had contact with art and as such lack the elements that enable them to interpret, appreciate, and enjoy it in conditions of equality with those who do possess such tools. On this point, it is clear that there are more questions than answers. What can museums do to reduce the blind spots and see beyond the immediate horizon? For finish, a few ideas. 1, museums are very important for cultural human development. Without a doubt, museums are irreplaceable, yet they are not necessarily the center of the galaxy. I cannot even claim that they form a part of the symbolic and material priorities of the most of the citizens in this country. 2, in line with its mission, vision, and conceptualization, the raison d'être of the MUAC is its audiences. In the museum, the tendency for the work of everyone to revolve around the curators and their proposals should be inverted in favor of horizontal working process that, as a whole, are focused on users. 3, the educational work design of community experience and pedagogical projects should be a priority. 4, it is important to avoid replicating within the museums models of imposition, discriminations, arrogance, over-intellectualization, and prejudice, in particular with regards to the learning and education programs. These are subtle forms of violence. 5, foster dialogue a broad gaze, processes of inclusion of diversity, collegial decision-making, and respect for difference of opinion. For the benefit of a society marked by violence and inequality, I trust that the MUAC and many other museums are capable of fostering the design of experiences that are creative, intelligent, innovative, and of such power that they have an impact on and contribute to improving people's quality of life and the democratization of culture. When André Breton visited this country in the early 20th century, he also said that Mexico is a surrealist country by nature. Today, we are experiencing a real nightmare, one that by turns appears frankly surrealist. However, I firmly believe that committed and sustained work in our respective spheres, step by step, and in its proper dimension, can come to transform nightmares into dreams and dreams into realities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pilar. It has been a wonderful lecture. Now we are going to have another one, and we are going to have Susana Smith Bautista. Susana comes from, how can I say, Selma's factory? Meaning, Susana is a master in art history with Selma, and as she told me this morning, art history in the States is a very narrow, not narrow-minded, but very narrow field. And she said, I was more interested in culture, not only in art. And as I was more interested in culture, I decided to make my PhD in communications. So she made a PhD in communications, and even if she defines herself as a very traditional approach, art history, and concerning the field of technology, she is the writer of one of the major books published on this field, Museums in the Digital Age, Changing Minutes of Place, Community, and Culture. She is now the new Director of Public Engagement at USC Pacific Asia Museum. As you very well know, Pacific Asia Museum was taken over by USC. That saved the museum, is one of the examples that we were saying. And she is the interim Deputy Director in this moment, in this transformation of the museum. She's going to give us a very interesting lecture on use and misuse of technology. Thank you, Susana.
Thank you, Manolo. Thank you, Manolo. Thank you, Selma, Graciela, to the Heart Foundation. Gracias a todos para estar aquí. The way in which I'm going to discuss the relationship with museums and the external world today is through digital technology, a subject that I know well and a powerful communication tool for both individuals and institutions alike. I'm going to talk about the challenges and the opportunities, as well as the uses and abuses of technology in museums. First of all, I am neither a technological determinist, like Marshall McLuhan, who said that inventions, like the horse collar, led to the development of the modern world, nor a technological pessimist, like the Luddites that blamed industrial mills and factory machines on the loss of jobs, or the neo-Luddites or the technophobes that are opposed to technologies of the computer age because of how millennials might become illiterate, antisocial, and egotistical. I'm going to touch on a bit of the inequality between small and large art museums, which become even more pronounced with the introduction of technology. Most of my academic research and writing, as well as my curatorial experience, have been with large art museums in the US. However, I am currently working in a small to medium-sized art museum, the Pacific Asia Museum, which became a part of the University of Southern California in December 2013. The process of change that I experienced firsthand as interim deputy director has given me a valuable insight into the particular challenges that face smaller museums. Mexico has many great museums in large metropolitan areas such as DF, Guadalajara, Monterrey, but it also has amazing smaller museums, both in these large cities and in the rest of the country. When discussing museums, I want to make it clear that I take a broad view of what is a museum, including cultural centers. Serving as executive director of the Mexican Cultural Institute in Los Angeles was instrumental in my understanding of the nature of culture and how it relates to museums. I am familiar with the extensive governmental network of cultural centers in Mexico, from the municipal casas de cultura to the state and federal centro culturales. However, I am also aware of the strong network of community museums and eco-museums that have flourished in small communities throughout Mexico, giving a voice to the people, some with governmental ties, some completely independent. Technology offers amazing opportunities for museums, as almost every museum knows. From the very basic use of email for more efficient communication, and the website for distributing information to a global audience, to various social media platforms that engage with the public in different ways, to more sophisticated mobile applications, games, online catalogs, crowdsourced exhibitions, alternate reality, virtual immersion, geolocation, interactive touchscreens, and I could go on and on. Digital technology has provided museums a means for faster and cheaper marketing that spreads to wider audiences, connecting with people around the world they previously would have no way of reaching, uploading photos and videos instantaneously. Digital technology allows museums to reach younger visitors using the same platforms they are comfortable with, providing opportunities for deeper engagement and participation, and for sharing with peers. Digital technology also provides a way for museums to share their collections with a wider audience through current information on research and conservation. And because of the now pervasive open culture movement, museums are opening up restrictions on downloading, sharing, and manipulating their images. Much has been written and discussed about all these examples that now permeate every part of the museum. In my book, I wrote about all these opportunities with examples from 5 major art museums in the US. But my core message was that technology needs to be adapted by each museum based on their particular communities, cultures, goals, and capacities. This is the challenge of technology, not just following the shiny new toy, but first understanding your needs and then determining how and if technology can support those needs. Today, technology is a part of all museums, small and large, private and public. We are getting smarter about adapting technology to our needs. There are more grants that provide money for digital projects and infrastructure, and the subject is discussed frequently in journals and at conferences. But there is one factor that has not yet come up, which I will discuss today, and that is how the internal operating structures of museums are supporting all these new digital initiatives and changes. Like most major shifts in museums, these operational changes start at the top, where museums are including digital technology in their strategic plans as part of senior management, breaking down rigid departmental borders to create more fluid and collaborative organizational structures, and when making decisions about hiring and firing. When it comes to digital technology, which requires a substantial commitment of resources, both financial and human, it is imperative that museums plan ahead for the future, incorporating technology into strategic planning, applying for grants, installing new systems and procedures. But another element that is just as critical is how museum staff can handle these changes, what new museum staff are needed, and how departmental structuring can best support these changes and reflect future direction. This, I believe, is a new challenge that digital technology presents to museums, and the main impetus for recalculating that we are starting to see in major museums in the US. Recalculating means to calculate again, especially in order to eliminate errors or to incorporate additional factors or data. Since 2012, I have conducted independent research on this subject because I started asking myself all of these questions following the research that I did for my book. From April 2012 until January 2015, I collected postings for technology-related jobs from basically 3 sources: the Museum Computer Network, Museums and the Web, and LinkedIn, for a total of 100 in the US, 2 in Canada, 1 in New Zealand, and 2 in Great Britain. My intent was to analyze the positions for their titles, departments, responsibilities, qualifications, required to find some answers. I have already collected and categorized the data, but for a full analysis, I will partner with the Arts Management faculty at Claremont Graduate University, which falls under the Peter Drucker School of Business, in order to bring more expertise on organizational management. After an initial review of the data, I made some surprising preliminary observations, which I would like to share with you today, and then discuss the implications. But first, let me just present a few examples of the positions that are starting to appear in museums. At the Field Museum, Digital Learning Manager in the Department of Education. At the Henry Ford Museum, Curator of Communications and Information Technology. The J. Paul Getty Museum, Education Technologist. Rhode Island School of Design Museum, Digital Content Producer in the Department of Education. Peabody Essex Museum, Associate Director of Integrated Media. The Walters Museum, Online Content Specialist for the Department of Web and Social Media. We see technology permeating departments other than the traditional IT, Information Technology departments, primarily the Education Department, but also Collections Management, Marketing, Publications. And we see these traditional IT departments changing into different names, or in the larger museums splitting off into new departments, such as Integrated Media, Interactive Media, Digital Media, and New Media. There is a distinction in the job requirements, where positions that lie in traditional tech departments generally do not require art history, or subject matter knowledge, or museum experience. They ask for backgrounds in computer science, interaction design, instructional design, entertainment technology, business administration, information science, engineering, management information systems, library science, and information technology, and on and on. And where technology does begin to appear in other departments, we see a requirement of the traditional departmental knowledge as well as digital technology skills and experience, something which I call hybrid positions, that become more important to small museums. Within larger museums can be found understandably larger departments with more highly specialized positions, whereas smaller museums tend to retain traditional positions and merely expand upon the requirements and responsibilities. Let me give you an example of a hybrid position, but in a large museum. At the Museum of Modern Art, Assistant Director for Interpretation and Research. Works with the Director of Interpretation and Research to lead the interpretive planning process with curators for MoMA's collection and approximately 30 exhibitions annually. Requirement: master's degree in art history, museum studies, museum education related field, 8 years experience working in a museum setting, in-depth knowledge of modern and contemporary art, demonstrated knowledge of current museum education, interpretation, visitor research, and evaluation practices and theories, familiarity with media production, experience with mobile, web technologies, game development, must have demonstrated experience and willingness to innovate and experiment with new modes of visitor engagement with modern and contemporary art in the museum and on an increasing number of digital platforms. Most of these job postings are from larger museums, and there is a reason, because they can afford to add new positions and create new departments. The Metropolitan Museum of Art's Department of Digital Media has over 70 staff, including Media Technology Manager, Digital Asset Specialist for Time-Based Media, Manager of Application Development, Online Community Manager, and more. So what are smaller museums doing then? This is an important question, given that the majority of museums, both in the United States and elsewhere, are small to medium-sized museums with limited resources. Smaller museums are slower to adopt digital practices and programs, usually because of the lack of digital skills in existing staff and the lack of funding to hire new staff or outside consultants. Nevertheless, they are still aware of the need to compete with larger museums and to adopt digital practices and programs that can better serve their visitors, especially younger visitors that every museum wants to attract and engage. And so they need to be more creative and innovative with partnerships, connecting with younger people that have digital skills. So this is where recalculating comes in. The opportunity to recalculate occurs when a position opens up with an opportunity to hire a new person with new background, or with occasional institutional changes that can provide an excuse for internal restructuring, or the opportunity is taken at any time by seeking external resources to provide training to existing staff. Neither of these options is easy, and I can say from firsthand experience with all three during the last 15 months at the USC Pacific Asia Museum. Oftentimes, existing staff are not comfortable when change is introduced from the top, either by introducing new job responsibilities with new skills or by restructuring departments, and they may leave. Even the opportunity to bring in new staff causes disruption, lowers existing staff morale, and overburdens the rest of the department. But then there is the opportunity to re-examine positions with new requirements and new responsibilities. Smaller museums really need to find the perfect hybrid person that brings with them both the subject content, art, science, history, as well as a solid understanding of digital technology and experience. This is the ideal situation. The problem is that their salaries are usually not high enough to attract these new professionals. But there are other options, such as supplementing digital skills with interns, volunteers, student workers, or working with classes on video editing, social media, web updating, app design, and more. If this is the case, if the digital is outsourced, then what becomes even more important is to ensure that museum staff have the necessary soft skills, such as understanding open culture, open source, open access, understanding the synergistic relationship of a museum's website to its other channels and to its brick-and-mortar site. Having the ability to analyze data, plan, establish goals with a balanced view of technology. Neither a complete technological pessimist nor optimist, and having an openness to change and learning. A great example of soft skills is the job posting for Director of Digital Media for the Balboa Park Online Collaborative, which includes museums ranging from history, art, science, and transportation. Aside from a knowledge of web and mobile technologies, the position seeks, quote, project management skills in scoping, identifying risks, scheduling, planning of digital projects, experience with agile-based project management methodologies, organizational skills to manage competing priorities and expectations and timely delivery of projects, ability to translate complex technical ideas into understandable solutions to a non-technologist, ability to interact effectively and diplomatically with a variety of internal and external people, maintain a culture of ongoing learning. Soft skills can target a problem, understand visitors, predict their needs, and come up with solutions based on research and discussion across departments. Another interesting observation from the data is the small percentage of positions, 17%, that mention the requirement of museum studies, which makes me wonder if museum studies programs are preparing museum professionals to fill these new super positions. Or the bigger question, how are future museum professionals getting the right training? Museum studies programs, certificates, curatorial programs, professional associations, they have all been transforming and slowly incorporating technology. For example, the American Alliance of Museums founded the Center for the Future of Museums in 2009, producing an annual forecasting report, Trends Watch, since 2012. Many certificate or degree programs incorporate digital technology within their marketing classes, which doesn't really create a broad understanding of technology. But I have to admit that this is something which is not easy to teach. I taught a class in the arts management program at Claremont Graduate University last year, the first time they introduced technology into the program, but as part of a traditional marketing class. The students were more interested in learning the how-tos rather than the whys. So a follow-up question that has been on my mind a lot lately is how are museums hiring people? Many of the job positions that I've collected show careful thought as to the new responsibilities and the new qualifications for the position. Again, we see how internal changes start at the top. Museum administrators need to be asking the deeper, open-ended questions to see if applicants truly understand the big picture of the role technology plays in museums, not just asking for hard skills. For example, I'm currently interviewing applicants for the position of Head of Communications and Marketing at the museum. And I've asked applicants to talk about the relationship between marketing, public relations, communications, not mentioning technology, but to see how they insert it into their answers. And I just hired a new head of education and public programs and asked, what is the role of digital technology in an education department? To me, these soft skills are more important than hard skills, if I had to choose. And unfortunately, often museums do have to choose. The abuse of technology occurs when technology drives the museum instead of missions driving the museum. It is great that technology has a presence at leadership levels and that technology is being brought into all departments, but the desire to bring museums into the 21st century to show that we are modern and global and connected cannot be at the expense of core museum praxis and values. And the need to identify museum staff with digital skills and experience cannot outweigh the continuing need for staff with knowledge of subject matter and experience in museums and in the cultural sector. Museums must maintain the same high standards that they are known for in their exhibitions and publications and programs, and find a way to bring the best professionals into its doors, which increasingly means being innovative. This is the very same approach to technology that enters into the conversations with technophobes and technological determinists and pessimists in the external world. If museums maintain a humanistic value for substance, as well as a historical perspective that the digital is merely a new means to an old end, such as the democratization of knowledge or the search for knowledge, then we can accommodate for the tremendous uses of technology that will only further our museum's missions and goals. Scholars such as Henry Jenkins at USC, supported by the MacArthur Foundation, talk about the cultural competencies and the core social skills needed for digital and media literacy in the 21st century, such as transmedia navigation, distributed cognition, appropriation, judgment, networking, and more. Howard Gardner talks about the tools young people need to understand the moral dimension of data usage. Gardner said, quote, "Teachers should never start with technology. They should start with a view of what kind of persons they would like their students to become, and what kind of knowledge, skills, understandings, and values they would like their students to acquire. At the end of the day, human values and aspirations need to remain dominant," end quote. I argue that museums need to be just as diligent and careful in our approach to digital technology as in the external world beyond the museum. Thank you.